Welcome back to Old School Sports and one of our out of the park baseball tutorial videos. This is one that several have asked me to talk about over the years, and I'm going to kind of do a twofer here for those of you who are very new to out of the park baseball. Hopefully this will help you a little bit with some of the multitude of options that you have in front of you when you're starting a new game, and hopefully at least let you know the things that I focus on to the extent that that's helpful or not. And the second purpose is to let our viewers know the settings that we're going to be using for our long play in Out of the Park Baseball 26, which will be beginning within the next day or two. After this episode is finished, the next one I'll put out will be a very short episode letting you know, for those who care, what team I'm going to be playing with in OOTP 26 for our long play series, and then we will move on to that very quickly. So we'll cover a few things today. The first thing that we're going to do is the main screen in OOTP 26, and what we want to do is start a new game. And for purposes of this, a ton of options here. We're going to be starting a new standard game. We're not going to play in challenge mode because we're actually going to have commissioner mode on. The reason being, and those of you who have followed our channel over the years know this, I'm going to end up playing likely decades with this team and hundreds of episodes, and there's just potential for little things to go wrong in the game that also having commissioner mode on allows you to address. And it also does allow us to tailor a lot of settings specifically the way that we want, because there are, as you can see here, some league rules and setting adjustments that are enabled and some other things that we can't do if we are in challenge mode. So we're going to continue with the new game, and we're going to have Major League Baseball, the Korean Baseball Organization, and the formerly known as independent leagues, which are now the MLB partner leagues, all enabled. We're going to do a live start as of today, May 15th. And this will be our tutorial game. Not that the name matters all that much. I will enable the World Baseball Classic. I know that there are some viewers who are really into that. It's just something I've never gotten all that into. Can't imagine that I'll ever take the time to be a GM or a manager in the WBC, but we will have that enabled in the background. Apologies to our very loyal viewers in Europe and Great Britain, but we will not be turning on Honk Ball or the British National Baseball League. I don't think either of those is going to be a huge memory suck, but the fewer things that we have running in the background, particularly when we do go out 20, 30 years into the future, the better. So we'll just focus on the things that we might actually use, and as I noted, we'll throw in the WBC. So go ahead and start the game, depending on the speed of your computer, depending on how many boxes you have checked here. This could take a little while for you to move on to the next stage when we'll really get into the settings for the game in more depth. And with the broad parameters for the game setup, it is time to set up our manager. We are not actually going to be playing with the San Francisco Giants, but is a small tribute to longtime viewer and frequent commenter Peter Hooper. We will take a look very briefly at his favorite team here in OOTP 26. My role is going to be general manager only. As I talked about, we'll be playing in commissioner mode. We'll not click on cannot be fired. And before we start going through all of the major game settings. I just want to touch upon a couple of other things I'll be doing at the start of my long play. Depending on whether or not the team I take over has a decent amount of money available, it's conceivable that I'll look to boost my scouting and player development budgets, as well as the draft and international amateur free agent budgets for the upcoming season. And the other thing that I will spend some time doing, and don't worry, I'll be doing all of this offline before boring you with the details, but I will be doing a deep dive into the coaching staffs across the organization. And if I've got money to buy out some poor coaches, I will definitely do that. Just a quick look at the Giants, and Major League pitching coach J.P. Martinez is only okay at teaching pitching, and he's poor with development and poor with mechanics. I think that can definitely be improved. He does have good relationships, but to me that doesn't make up for the poor ratings that they have with him in OOTP. Another example, our high A manager, Jeremiah Nackstedt. Poor with development, poor with mechanics. And when we look at that team that he is ultimately in charge of, only average relationships. So certainly someone who could easily be improved. Those really poor coaches who happen to be across the organization are the first that I'll be looking to move on from. But as I noted, that's something that I'll be doing offline, so I don't bore you with all the details of firing coaches and waiting to hire them. But we'll certainly be looking at scouting, development, draft budgets, and international amateur free agent budgets, and also hopefully looking to clean up the coaching staff at whatever team I do take over for the long play. And one final thing to note about personnel, in addition to the coaches throughout the organization, definitely worth taking a pretty serious look at your team trainer and your scouting director as well. Our team trainer here, Anthony Reyes, although he's legendary with rehabbing other injuries and outstanding at preventing leg injuries, he's average, okay, or fair at everything else. And the two ratings that I tend to care most about, preventing arm injuries, because I generally like to build a strong pitching staff, and fatigue recovery to hopefully ensure that players can play in as many games as possible and don't let fatigue contribute to as many injuries, are where he has his lowest ratings. So he's someone I'd conceivably think about moving on from. Scouting director Michael Holmes is actually pretty decent, good with major leaguers, good with minor leaguers, good with international scouting, actually outstanding with amateurs, and he's a Favor Tools scout. If you haven't been on the OOTP message boards over the last week or so, I would strongly suggest reading a recent post there in the OOTP 26 forums from game developer Matt Arnold. He goes into pretty significant detail around the new scouting system and how Favor Tools scouts work versus Favor Ability scouts. I've historically tended towards Favor Tools and highly Favor Tools scouts. I don't know that anything that Matt said is going to get me to change that, but it does seem like they have revamped the scouting system to be a little more balanced, and he's also clarified exactly what every kind of scout does and how it manifests itself in the game. So if you're in for perhaps changing your scout, I would definitely recommend reading Matt Arnold's post at the OOTP forums, and thank him for putting that out there. And with that, it is time to get into the game settings. The global settings, not necessarily a ton that I am going to change here. We'll continue to use the complete scouting system. I am going to make one change that has been requested by many viewers over the years, I've tended to use the star ratings for the overall and potential ratings, but based on significant viewer feedback, we'll be moving to 20 to 80 this year, although we're still going to use the increments of 5. Admittedly, not the most significant change. Some of these settings hopefully will make the game a little more challenging and a little more difficult. Have gotten good feedback from viewers over the years on settings that can potentially be tweaked to hopefully make the game a little more interesting and a little more challenging. Most recently have been having a long back and forth in the comments section to a recent episode with Jackhammer Possessor, who's come up with some pretty interesting ideas to hopefully make the game a little more challenging, many of which I'll be integrating into the next 10 or 20 minutes of this video as we talk through some of the settings. I will click that GM-only users are always in control of lineups and hiring. Not really going to change any of the auto-save settings much, really just focus on human teams. You can get more detail than that if you want, but I want to try to keep the database size as reasonable as possible to hopefully keep the game running reasonably well and reasonably fast, given that I am, as I noted earlier, likely to be playing for decades into the future. Clearly, my goal in playing is to ultimately win the game. Not that there's a pure win and a pure loss and a pure end of a game like OOTP, but obviously prefer to be successful on the field. But I will have the storylines enabled here in OOTP 26. That's always interesting, even though some of them repeat from year to year. I think there are some different things that I've never seen that crop up, and probably some new things added every year. So hopefully that helps personalize the stories of this fictional baseball universe a little bit better. Moving to the next tab, the players and team settings, and this is one where I'm going to make a few changes. I'm actually going to crank the injuries up a bit from the normal to high for both short and long-term injuries. Presumably that will make things a little more challenging for me. Clearly it's going to likely make things challenging for the rest of the league as well, because they'll be dealing with more injuries also. But hopefully it'll require me to build an even better bench, have more depth, build a better minor league system over time, and also just even when I have a plan that I think is laid perfectly for the team, more injuries will certainly make it more challenging for me to execute on that plan. I am going to show player personality ratings on the profile page. I don't think it's unrealistic to do that. When you think about scouting a player, you're talking to the player, you're talking to his coaches, you're talking to his teammates, you're talking to his parents, you're talking to coaches on other teams, people who have worked with him wherever he's kind of grown up. So it's not inconceivable that you're going to kind of have a sense of players with better personality traits, players with worse personality traits. Although I do like the fog of war that's been added into the new version of the game, where until you get to a certain level of scouting accuracy, those player personality ratings don't show up. And I think that that makes a lot of sense. Player development settings is something that, because I've only played 6 years in OOTP in the recently concluded mini-series with the Los Angeles Angels, I don't have a ton of experience with personally. Looking at the message boards, it seems like there has been a little bit of concern about development speed and aging speed, and there's definitely been something that's been addressed with the patches as far as players' defensive ability deteriorating very dramatically and very quickly in their 30s. We saw that in that OOTP sim when we visited Mike Trout and saw the way that his outfield ratings had, 'd, had, 'd, 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 This is something that I could conceivably go back and change a little bit, but I tend to think that sometimes the player development is not as quick as I hope, and the player aging happens a little more quickly than I hope. So we're going to just decrease the aging speeds a little bit and increase the batter and pitcher development a little bit as well. Certainly something, if things aren't working out, I could come back and revisit and make it more significant or get it back more towards the base level. Big thing that I am going to change is I'm going to disable the player development focus. This was something that was added into the game last year. To me, it's just too tedious to deal with. I also don't love... I like that it's a zero-sum game in terms of the sliders for all the different abilities, but I don't love that the negativity associated with areas that you underinvest is more significant than the potential benefits associated with the areas where you're investing over the median. And I think that it's something that ultimately I can probably manage better than the AI for the computer. So I feel like on the margins, this is something that I'm not going to say it is going to have a significant impact, but I think maybe taking that out of the AI's hands may just kind of normalize development of players on all the AI teams a little bit. Really, the reason, though, is I just find it a lot of work for very little benefit, and I don't want to be potentially going into dozens of players and having to manage that manually. But I also don't want to rely on the AI to do it, since I don't think it's particularly well. Development lab size, we can go from 1 to 30 this year. We're just going to keep it at 8. This is something where I do think that if you crank it up very high, again, I think ultimately humans are going to do better than the AI managers in that. So keeping it at the base number of 8, I think, is a reasonable number to use, where hopefully we'll have an opportunity to try to develop some of our top prospects and top players each offseason. Won't become too big of a task to do, but it's also just not such a big number that if I am better at it than the AI, that I'll get a big advantage. I am going to also request the email where we can see the specific rating changes that happened at the end of each session in the development lab. And I'm not going to change anything as far as the stat settings. Basically just retain the major league stats for players, again, to try to just keep the file size somewhat manageable. Part of the reason I've made a couple of those decisions to keep the file size a little bit manageable is that another response to viewer feedback, we will have face gen pictures for major league players only, but we will have those this year. That's something that some of you have requested over the years, since I generally turn it off to keep the file size smaller. But in some cases, I'm willing to give people what they want, and this is one where we'll click it on this year and see if we can blow up my computer. Moving on to AI settings, this is one where we're going to make a pretty significant change. We're going to crank trading difficulty all the way up to 11 to refer to... This is Spinal Tap, the movie. I've talked about this a lot over the years. I honestly think putting it at that level certainly makes it harder to make trades, but there's trades where I would be willing to do where I'm totally getting ripped off by the other team that I can't even make with that kind of trade setting. So in some ways, I'd argue that although it makes things more difficult for me, It also potentially makes things more difficult in some cases for the other teams when I would actually be willing to overpay for somebody and they just won't trade the guy away, even if I'm giving him three top major league players and the three top prospects in our system. But regardless, we'll crank it up to as hard as possible. Going to keep the trading preference even between veterans and prospects. I don't have a strong opinion on this one. I know some people really go one way or the other, but to me, there's times, particularly when I take over a new team that's not that good, that I'd really want it to favor veterans highly when I'm trying to trade away veterans, the few valuable players I have, for young guys. But then once I have a developed team and in July, getting close to the trade deadline, I'm trying to bring on somebody to win, I'd probably have it favor prospects at that point when I might be trying to trade them away for a veteran. So to me, I keep that setting neutral. Don't use hard mode or the reputation system. Hard mode to me just makes it take so much longer to get a trade done. I am such a tool, perhaps would be a good word to describe me, that I will beat my head against a wall for hours and hours and go back and forth to ultimately get the best trade. Even if hard mode is on, because I have used it in the past. So to me, it just makes hard mode is essentially it just take a real long time to get to the trade that you were going to get to mode. So for that purpose, just turn it off. As much as I love investing hundreds and thousands of hours into OOTP, don't really want to invest them when I'm just banging my head against a wall trying to make a trade. One of the suggestions that I did get from Jack Hammer Possessor that I'm going to try this year is to move the AI lineup selection to sabermetric with splits favored from traditional. My hope is that perhaps teams use lefty and righty splits making their decisions a little more often, use modern sabermetrics as opposed to traditional evaluation, and hopefully on the margins the AI makes some better lineup decisions, some better pinch hitting decisions, some better platoon decisions. How big an impact it's going to have, I don't know, but willing to make that change and try. Don't do anything with the almanac, don't do anything with the database, but move on to the league settings, and there are a lot of things to think about here, although honestly, not going to be changing anything in the functions at this time or in the league and teams, as we're going to be playing with traditional 2025 Major League setup. Moving on to the rules tab, several things that we're going to change here. We will expand the September roster expansion size to 30 players from 28. I liked it in the old days when teams would have a bunch of players called up by the end of late September. Got a lot of opportunities to see some young prospects, and I do like having a few more players to be called up in September. So we're going to expand the roster size a couple there. We are not going to allow ghost players in the minor leagues. Minor league depth charts, I like those based on potential ratings. I will force start the key players in my organization and the top prospects, and then leave the rest of the decisions in the minors to the managers of those levels. But still don't mind when they play players with higher potential ratings rather than high in current ratings. Every once in a while there will be a diamond in the rough that I wasn't spending the time to force start, who the manager will be giving playing time to because he sees some potential in him, and that player will end up exceeding his expectations, exceeding my expectations, and becoming a real prospect. I have, over the past few years, allowed trading of injured players. That's one that I'm going to click off this year on the margin. I think that will make things a little more difficult for me just by eliminating a little bit of optionality. There's some players on my roster, some players on my organization that I just won't be able to trade away, or in some cases trade for. I am going to drop the AI trading frequency just one notch to low. I think there are cases when you look at some of the trades made between teams where they just don't really make a ton of sense for either team. And hopefully by dropping that trading frequency to low, maybe some of those trades that are less compelling, that just barely get the margin for both teams to agree in them, but don't ultimately make a lot of sense, won't actually happen. Can't say that I think that's going to have a real significant impact going forward, but we will do that. Not going to allow draft pick trading. It would be great if there was a feature in OOTP that would allow compensatory picks to be traded, because I believe in Major League Baseball at this point those are the only picks that can be traded. But because this just opens up everything, not going to allow that. Everything else, as far as the draft settings, the number of rounds, the composition of the players, the draft lottery and how that works, going to run with the defaults on all of those. Moving to the financials, not a lot that I'm going to change here. Going to keep yearly inflation relatively low. Not going to change anything as far as service time, qualifying offers. Not going to change any of the baseline contracts. We'll let those things evolve a little bit with the small amount of inflation that we'll have in the game. But otherwise, we're just going to leave the financial settings completely alone. For the time being, I am going to click off automatic evolution of the league. Just kind of want to get through the first few seasons of this game, make sure that the A's franchise actually ends up in Los Angeles when they should, with a legitimate major league stadium. And then at that point, I think I will turn on automatic evolution of the league. Quite honestly, the only thing I'll probably have clicked on is potential expansion. Some of these other things are just not all that interesting to me. And team relocation is the one that I might consider putting on. Also, in addition to expansion, when I do click automatic evolution of the league back on down the line. But I have seen situations in the past where a storied franchise in a great baseball city like the St. Louis Cardinals, that's had a lot of success and good support from fans over the years, ends up moving, which I think is just kind of ridiculous. So it seems a little bit random to me, so I may not end up turning that one on. Not too much else that I'm going to be changing on these screens. Did change the reliever award to the Mariano Rivera award. Changed Silver Slugger and Gold Glove for the hitting and fielding awards. Not changing anything as far as the Hall of Fame and the milestones. After this 2025 season, if I remember, I am going to force the start of the season back about a week and a half towards the end of March or early April, and maybe move the forced start to a Thursday. I just think that the international series, where they have two teams that play and the rest of the league in OOTP just sits around for about a week and a half. Spring training is over and you're just kind of sitting there waiting for the season to start, is kind of silly. So I will likely, if I remember, go back and push back the start of the season to late March or early April for all of the teams beginning in the 2026 season. Not a lot that I'm going to change on the Players tab. I am going to drop the international scouting discoveries down to the default of 16 per year, but there are multiple teams that still have two DSL teams. If I find that it's hard to kind of keep those teams stocked, I may have to crank it back up. If I end up playing with a team that has two DSL teams, might need to increase it for that reason. Or the other alternative would be for me to go into the settings for the Dominican Rookie League and then delete one of the teams that's associated with the franchise that I play with, and then kind of rerun their schedule for this upcoming season. But for the time being, we'll try to go with a fewer international scouting discoveries for each team. Keep the IAFA class, the International Free Agent class, and the Independent League free agents similar to the baseline. Stats and AI, I'm going to make a couple of relatively minor changes here that I hope may make the game slightly more challenging, although it's going to be slight. I don't think there's a ton that I can do here to help the AI. The things that I am going to change, though, I am going to increase the defensive substitutions up a notch to often, and increase pinch hitting for position players from rarely to normal. Again, particularly with the AI using that sabermetric focus, potentially pinch hitting a little more, making more defensive substitutions. Perhaps on the margins will help the AI make some better decisions. At some point going forward, some year, I would love to create a more 1980s, 1990s version of baseball where batting averages are higher, strikeouts are lower, home runs are lower. But for purposes of this league, I don't have a ton of experience playing around with the stats and AI tabs. I've heard some horror stories about what can happen in the leagues if you mess with those things too much. So although I don't love the 3 true outcomes era that we're playing with, at this point I'm just going to live with it for purposes of this game. And last but not least, we'll take a look at the manager options, which is where we are now. Not too much that I really want to change here. Noted we're playing in commissioner mode, but noted that I can be fired. As we've talked about, I let the minor league managers handle the lineups, the player strategy, player development focus, not going to be an issue since we've got that turned off in this version. Everything else, promotions, demotions, signings, personnel, instructor roles, coaches, team personnel, setting budgets, drafting players, trading, etc., etc., etc. That's all the GM stuff that I love to do. Given that I had set up the game into the legacy mode where I've got control of lineups and depth charts, I've already got control of those things, but want to make sure that ultimately I can set the lineups and depth charts, set the pitching staff, and set the player strategies. But then I do kind of let my manager make the decisions during the game in the context of the lineups that I am imposing on him from on high as the general manager. And for what it's worth, those are the settings that I plan to use in OOTP 26. If you've got any real strong opinions on something else that you think could make things more interesting, better, worse, more challenging, less challenging, open to hearing them, although probably not going to change a ton. It's going to take a good, rational argument to get me to modify things significantly at this point, but I am hopefully always at least willing to listen to feedback, even if it doesn't necessarily make me change my decisions or my behavior. If you're new to the game, again, hope this helps you kind of understand some of the options on the many and sometimes intimidating screens and choices that you have in OOTP baseball. And as I noted, when I do set up my long-term playthrough, these are the settings that I will be using, unless there's, again, something that the Worldwide Scouting Department convinces me I should change over the relatively near term. As I mentioned, next time around that you hear from me, I'll be putting out a very brief episode just letting you know what team I'm going to be playing with under these settings in OOTP 26. And then it will be off to the races. We've had a couple hundred episodes in our long play series over the last few seasons. And the goal, even though it's a relatively late start for us in mid-May, is to ensure that we put out a lot of content that hopefully some of you will enjoy over the coming 8, 9, or 10 months. Until our next episode, thanks so much for watching, and hope you have a great day.